Well, cool, Kyle. I don't think we had too much of a chance to chat, so I'm looking forward to kind of hearing kind of your perspective on how things are going and where things are headed at the LSS as well. But thanks both of you for taking the time. This is going to be super like informal, but basically like twofold, like 2 points kind of cover is one is I'd love to just like document the before and after Penji story because we've done a pretty like bad job of that over the years of like documenting what's worked and like why people would want to launch Penji in the first place. So super helpful to take any notes that y'all have, just honestly from memory or whatever you have is great. Kelly, I do have all those files of like the drop-in appointment transition, so we're good there. But then second is also, I think you both have seen some of this. Kelly's helped with some of this. Kyle would love to pick your brain as well in the future, but we're making a lot of content right now for like just best practices guides for learning centers and seeing what's worked at one center and one school and how that could translate to others. And so I think a lot of the call will be spent on some of the topics I sent over email that I think y'all have done super well at over the years. The drop into appointment transition was interesting. Centralizing all your tutoring was interesting. Some other things. So kind of just like two-step thing here, and that would be the sort of agenda. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Amazing. Great. Well then, so background wise, so maybe just starting like from the beginning, we'll just kind of walk through everything. And so before Penji, Kelly, you were running the LSS, and there was quite a few different centers on campus. And I remember like in our first conversations, you were talking about you and I think Tab and maybe some other folks, but you were trying to get everyone more on the same page, I think. So would you just kind of remind me if I'm remembering that right of like how that happened and centralizing tutoring at Arkansas State? Like what was the idea there?
Okay, so I think it started really with I adopted the center and their practices. And the center that I adopted was working off of like Google Docs essentially to track everything.
Right.
And our proximity to the writing center leaned to a partnership there. And when Tab and I had started talking about, okay, well, what's better than Google Docs?
Yeah.
And how can we get students to check in more efficiently? And how can we get rid of some of this user error in all of our reports? And so we were working with ITS on campus to try and build this homegrown system.
Mm,
And in order to show ITS that there was enough buy-in and that they weren't just creating this system just for, this like really niche center, we were pulling in all of our other partners across campus to say, okay, well, like who's doing the same thing that we're doing so that we can show them that there would be a lot of use, and it would be worth their time to build for us.
right.
And so we really started our cohort, I think, there with this like, we need friends for
To
ITS to
support
do
it.
work for us. Yeah.
Right.
So
Kyle, were you a tutor at the time? Is that
I was,
right?
yeah,
Amazing. What were you a tutor for?
downstairs when we made the transition.
What subjects did you tutor?
I did like intro level maths. I was a history major, but I never saw anyone for history. I saw mainly like philosophy, sociology, and then like college algebra.
And you were just good enough at math as a history major to do some tutoring there?
I was good at college algebra. I could do that.
Solid. You could do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
good teaching. Cool. So that makes sense. So the initial kind of pain point or whatever, Kelly, was Google Docs, manual tracking of things. You mentioned inefficient check-ins. Can you say more about that? What did you mean? What do you mean by that?
just like huge gaps in, the tutors were really responsible for entering information. But I think there was like some self check-in. So, the tutor might point you to check in or the tutor might check you in. If the tutor checked you out, it was a good day. But a lot of it was just like, oh, well, we forget to go back and we got busy with this other group and oh, well, we saw
Yeah,
10 students, but oh, they didn't check in. Oh, I never got anybody's name. And so
right.
just a lot of like huge gaps in our data.
Yeah. What did that like what impact does that have when a program has those gaps? Like what frustrations did that cause or yeah, how did that feel?
Well, it was like first, I guess, proof of work. We're paying these tutors and we were paying them by the hour, but we couldn't show how efficient they were. We couldn't say that anyone was busier than anyone else. It created scheduling problems, of course, because we didn't have good data on which subjects were seen the most or not at all. And then trying to, as a co-curricular program, prove your worth when you go up to say, I need more money or I need more resources, but then you have data that doesn't make sense or is incomplete. You're not bringing
Yeah.
best foot
No, but
forward.
right. No. So it's sort of like you couldn't trust your own data.
Yeah.
Right. And so in those various things you mentioned, you can't improve your operations internally or communicate with the rest of campus. You probably don't even feel confident going and trying to communicate with the rest of the campus about it because you're like, I don't even really know that what I'm saying is true. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's all anecdotal.
100%. Yeah. And so check in more efficiently. That makes sense. User error. So it really is like data quality, kind of that whole thing was around data quality. So that was the big thing. And then ITS wanted you to prove that there were more folks available that wanted to use the software as well. Did everybody else or most other folks have this similar data quality concerns? Was it also pretty manual for most other folks, or do you remember?
Everyone had a really manual process. I don't know that everyone was quite as concerned with the data. The Writing Center tab was all on board. Everyone else, though, was faculty led. And so this was really secondary for them,
I see.
Yeah.
So maybe it probably sounded okay to them, but it wasn't as big of an issue for them.
Right.
Okay, cool. And so, okay, great. And so centralizing, so how many centers were involved in this cohort? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, it sort of ebbed and flowed a little bit, but I think there was a solid core of 8, is what I want to say. I think at one point we had 10 centers, and I think we drilled down to about 8. I don't know where you're at now, Kyle.
There's technically 9 different departments that utilize Penji right now, 9
Yeah.
to 10.
Yeah.
I think at the start, it would have probably been, I think I said 8. I think we may have had 7 or 8 at the start. It depends. I can't remember if Comm Center existed back when we started using Penji.
The Comm Center?
Yeah, were they around?
They did. Yeah,
Okay.
they existed.
Yeah, we're at 9 right now.
Nice.
We've added a couple others in the last few years.
Cool. Makes sense. But that's kind of, those groups existed even 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, and it's really just been about improving unity of them. Okay, cool. Makes sense to me. And so then when did Penji enter the picture? I know Ben called you on a run.
2020.
And was that you were still negotiating with ITS, or had you gone down the road of building a
No, we
solution?
were fully down the road with ITS. We had a solution in place, and we were using the homegrown system we used was called TARP.
Nice.
Tutor Assessment Repository, or I don't even know what it stood for at this.
I didn't know it was an acronym, honestly. I just knew
it was an acronym. Yeah, it was an acronym. Tutor.
We just chose TARP. It just sounds good.
Yeah, Tutor Assessment and Retention Program or something like that, but it doesn't matter. But we had fully gone down the road of TARP, and they built us a thing, and we used it.
Was working.
It worked relatively well, some hiccups, but it was all a check-in system. It wasn't a scheduling tool for our tutors. And so then we had a new problem. Our new problem was that we were using a scheduling tool. A lot of us were just doing paper calendars. We tried one summer to use PAC support, which was Starfish.
Right.
This PAC support on our campus. We tried to use their scheduling function. Or we were using paper scheduling. Then we had TARP for checking everyone in and out, and that also had a note-taking system in it. But then because COVID, we were also using GoBoard.
Oh yeah, GoBoard.
Right.
GoBoard. I remember GoBoard.
And some of us were using Zoom, and so we were all over the place.
Yeah, right.
And to access tutoring, you might have to use 3 or 4 different systems.
100%. And was appointments more in the mix? It was formerly very drop-in. And then
no appointments. Yeah.
Even during COVID.
So during COVID, the Writing Center was really the only center was like doing appointments.
Hmm.
And so COVID, I think on our campus, really, we went home during summer. And so we didn't see a lot of tutoring in the summer anyway. I think we were still doing drop-in even when we were doing online. We were doing like
Right.
online drop. Do you remember, Kyle?
That was the semester I was student teaching, so I actually wasn't working
You
that
weren't
semester.
working. Okay. So I
Well, I
don't
can.
think, I think we were still doing drop-in hours, like
Some people
even
did.
through the summer
Right.
online.
Yeah.
And
That adds up because then you eventually made the decision to shift. But that
yeah,
was post Penji
post
time.
Penji. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Penji, Ben had called
Yep.
and uh, it was just a good time because it
Right.
was summer and it was COVID and
Yeah, it made sense. Appointments could have been nice. You were kind of into it, right?
yes, yeah.
Was so the main issue when you were using TARP is it felt like then TARP did the check-ins, but then there was a bunch of other stuff going on for scheduling management and such. Could you just talk on that a little bit more?
So building our drop-in schedule was like a full-time job for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there wasn't a day that I didn't touch it multiple times
Hmm.
and trying to keep it up to date. And I was using a Google Doc so that it would stay live on our website as I
Hmm.
made changes so that students were seeing the most accurate information. But of course, like faculty are printing it off and turning it into a PDF and
Right.
using it. And so no one actually knows when anyone's working. And
Yeah.
then, you know, our busiest tutors, our most academically engaged folks are also our busiest students. And so
Right.
they would get into situations where, like, oh, I've got to do this other thing, and you've scheduled me for all these hours, and I can't make any of them. And, it just is messy. It's
Right.
just messy. So
Yeah.
I think that was sort
Manually creating schedules was
of
really hard. Yeah. Makes
that
sense.
that was a piece that we needed to fix. So,
Do you remember? Okay, so that makes sense. And then so Penji, so we called, talked to you
mhm.
about it. It was mid-COVID times, summertime, good timing. And so can you remember, like, was that the main thing that you were like, okay, building schedules sucks, and Penji seems like it could help me with that, and let's see if everyone else wants it? Or just like kind of, is that about it?
Yes, yeah. It was
Yeah.
essentially like, oh, we can go from using 3 or 4 softwares to using one software,
Hmm.
and it's a good time to do that. And
Yep.
the scheduling piece, I think, was the biggest motivator.
Yeah. What were the three or four softwares, if you can recall? Like
So it would have been TARP, which was homegrown. It
check-ins.
would have been the pack support or the Starfish system for all of our scheduling pieces when we were trying to schedule.
Scheduled appointments or building tutor schedules?
Both. Yeah.
Both. So you were using Pack Support even to track like this tutor's working this drop-in shift.
Hmm.
Okay, got it. Yep.
Yep. And then GoBoard and Zoom, but they weren't
Hmm.
integrated, right?
Yeah.
Like
You
with
had to manage
Penji,
Zoom links.
yeah, right. So
Hmm.
with Penji, we still are using that, but it wasn't embedded in any way.
You don't have to like think about it because it's
Right.
plugged in. Yeah, right.
Right.
Cool. Makes sense. Okay, great. And then launching Penji, getting everybody on board. Do you remember how that unfolded? Like, I forget if it was a gradual process or if folks were down with it, you know?
Yeah, there was like a small revolt from our tutoring staff. All of our directors, it was an easy sell because I paid for it.
Yeah.
So learning support paid for it. The whole campus could use it. It was an easy transition to say, we're going from these 4 things to this one thing. It's going to do all this stuff for you. Our directors were like, oh, easy. Yes, let's do that. To get our tutors on board, we weren't just moving to a different software, but we were changing the structure of the center. And so, along with changing the structure of the center, at the same time, we physically were moving. And so we moved from the first floor of the library to the third floor of the library. So they like left for COVID and then
Yeah.
they came back and we had changed everything.
Right.
And so what are you thinking?
We moved before we used Pinji.
Yeah, but it
We
was
moved like a year
like, I don't think so.
because I tutored up here for at least a semester, and I was gone all of spring 2020. So I would have tutored in fall of 2019 up in our space up here. And then because I never used Pingy as a tutor.
But we didn't have drop-in when we came up, though, did we? Once we got to the third floor, we weren't on drop-in, and we wouldn't have moved away from drop-in, I don't think, until we
Probably
had.
not, because I was still hosting like philosophy hours for students up here. I saw Dr. Cave's classes came by a lot.
Oh, you were still doing drop-in?
It had to be dropped because I never used Pingy, so I wouldn't have had anyone to make appointments.
Okay. Well, to
This was
not
a
get
long time
in the
ago.
weeds, yeah, yeah, it was a minute ago. But to not get too much in the weeds, like a lot changed in a
At
pretty short
once.
amount of time, right?
Question,
Yeah.
was the drop-in to appointment shift, did that happen right away? Or is it this pre that? Like,
Did the drop-in?
because I feel
I
like
think that
we
we
partnered,
changed it with Penji.
and so that was part of your initial, like, we're going to launch this software from the start. It's going to be a new model.
Yes.
I remember it was at least early on because that was the big thing where early you were like, this has been a pretty big win for us. And it was like, here's the data. And it was like, oh, wow.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and do you remember then, can you speak on the drop-in piece a little bit, just overall? Like, did you already sense that there were some issues with drop-in that you wanted to solve, or there's some efficiency
Yes.
stuff?
Okay.
So
So
walk me
like
through
the
that.
biggest piece was that we had one tutor in particular.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Wait, go
And
ahead and please tell
she
me that. Yeah.
had come to me at the end of the semester. And again, we were like working off of this messy data. And I'm like, I don't think that you've seen anyone this year. Like, is that true or not true? And she's like, oh, yeah, no, I haven't seen anyone. And I was like, okay, like, well, we've paid you,
Quite
you
a
know,
bit.
10 hours a week, every week for 16 weeks.
He's like,
And,
I know.
and yeah, and she's like, yeah. I mean, and she was like so
It's a
sweet and
great
so
job.
nice. Yeah, it was an awesome job for her. But like, I was like, yeah, we can't keep you back. Like, we can't bring you back next semester. And she's like, oh yeah, I totally understand. Like, took it so
Wow.
well because
I
she had
wouldn't do
done
that either. Yeah,
nothing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
All semester long. And so it was like,
That's
okay,
so funny.
yeah, and I mean, I was doing one-on-ones with all of my staff, right? And so she had had multiple times throughout the semester to have a conversation about that, but our data was so unreliable that by the end of the semester, that's when I could see those like huge red flags,
Mm-hmm.
like this is a huge gap. And now that, she's a one-off, and a lot of my tutors were seeing multiple students at a time,
Yeah.
but there were some obvious inefficiencies.
Yeah. Got it.
And I think minimum wage was going up in Arkansas, and our budget, I think, had been cut at one point. It was like a
Yeah.
sweeping across the institution. Everyone's
You
budgets
could
are cut
tell.
by
Yeah.
3%. Yeah. And so we were like, okay, we're not getting more resources. We're spending more money per hour per tutor. We have to be as efficient as possible.
Right. And you figured that tightening up data and doing some of the things, like the ability to shift to appointments and streamline platforms, even though you had to pay for Penji, would net out to being like more financially efficient to offset that or more. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Nice. Yep. Cool. And then launched all good Tutor Revolt. Oh, this is an interesting one. So and you've told me in the past, but you had some thoughts, particularly about the shift from drop-in to appointments, which allowed you to do pay as you go, right? So basically you pay for every appointment worked now. Is that still how it works? Yeah. Kyle, you were tutoring during some or around some of this shift, right? Or did you,
I would have never done the appointments. I would have
oh,
been
okay.
working as a GA for Kelly when we swapped
Yeah.
the appointment system.
Yeah.
I only ever tutored drop-in from what I remember.
Yeah. But so can you just recap, I guess, Kelly, the that particular element of the tutor revolt and what the initial arguments were, and then also what it netted out to?
Yeah, I think that really it was just tutors who felt like our center wasn't the same. It was like
Mm,
it was a vibe check more than
yeah.
anything, right? Because before they would get to hang out with their friends and they would get, they had this like level of camaraderie that when you move to an appointments only program, they lost some of that.
Mm,
And so it was the camaraderie that they were missing. But then and I had not done a good enough job of explaining um, the benefit of the efficiency, right?
right.
Because they could feel what they lost,
Yeah.
um, but they couldn't see what we as a center had gained.
Yeah.
And so then it was me backpedaling to communicate to say, well, okay, thank you. This isn't going to change, and here's why.
Right.
And once I presented, the efficiencies and how we were able to hire more tutors and how everyone was able to work more and actually serve more students. And, depending on who you were and what you were tutoring, you essentially made the same money regardless. Um, they were bought in and they were appeased a little bit more.
Yeah.
But, it was, oh, well, we were having a lot of fun.
Right.
And
Now it's a job.
having less. Now it's a job.
Now I'm not getting paid to not work.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
even less than like the for fun part. I mean, Kelly talked a little bit about the inefficiency of like paying for drop-in tutoring. It was extremely inefficient. I remember when I was tutoring, I was, I think, like first or second in efficiency, and I was tutoring like maybe 55% of the time I was there. I was
Mm.
working like 24 hours a week.
Wow.
So I was barely working for half the time I was getting paid for, and I was like top of the folks in like the amount of students I was seeing, or like the
Wow.
amount of time I committed.
Yep.
So 11 hours across 25 people every week for a semester, and
A lot of money.
Kelly's just sinking money
Exactly.
at us for just hanging out and not actually
100%.
benefiting campus. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and you were starting to help with some of the program management at the time, Kyle, would you say? Like,
Yeah, I moved into a G, I guess right around the time we started Pingy.
yeah. And
Um,
that means as a graduate assistant, you were helping, like you were getting paid to work at the center or
yeah,
LSS. Yeah.
yeah, I
Cool.
was getting paid to kind of help Kelly with whatever project she wanted, some like
Nice.
assistance.
Quelling tutor rebellions is your first project. Good luck. Lead tutor.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well that makes sense. And so, and quickly to recap the benefits you mentioned that were compelling to the tutors, can you just restate those one more time? So these are the things that are actually good about this change. Like what were those?
Well, a part of it was that they weren't overwhelmed with students. So they could
Mm,
still schedule group appointments, but instead of servicing, an entire class of students in a drop-in center, they would at least know how many students were coming. They'd be able to prepare more for that. They were getting paid for all of the time that they worked. Their schedules were really flexible, so that was one thing that they really loved. If they had a big chem test coming up on Friday, they could just cancel all of their hours for Friday. They wouldn't have to come in, and they didn't have to ask me to do that. So they had more autonomy. Um, and what other benefits, Kyle?
I mean, it was later on, but the integration with like Banner's been super useful for folks. I think that's
mm,
convenient.
mm,
Being able to like update your classes so that like our tutors can, rather than having to tell Kelly individual courses and then Kelly having to update that, like tutors can edit the classes or at least
mm.
that's adjusting. We can quickly make those
Got
changes.
it.
It's convenient.
Yeah.
Um, and then just like, when like they can request a change, Kelly or I could make it. And then like the next 3 minutes, the change is live on the app.
Yeah.
So there's no delay for students
That's
to do
nice.
that, which is convenient.
Yeah.
I think like
Cool.
consistency too, and being able to know who they're tutoring.
Yeah.
Um, Even a lot of our tutors are more introverted folks or
Yeah.
were, and they could tutor the same student all semester and like not know their name.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think like
Because they just come in and you're right into it. You
yeah,
gotta teach them, and
you
you know,
jump
I
right in,
think you were
right?
here yesterday. But then if you know, oh, I have an appointment with Mary later, like you were thinking about it more.
And
Right.
the repository for Pingy was super useful. Like previously when I was tutoring, like if a student needed help, they just showed up with the stuff they had. So I had like 15 seconds
Ah,
to figure out what they needed help with. I did, do I remember how to do this off the top of my head?
great. That's
Whereas
a
when
good
they
one.
come in with like math or chemistry, engineering,
Mm-hmm.
we've got an option to like, hey, if you can you like upload a homework example
Yeah.
or a question. And so our staff can like actually prep more.
Yeah.
When it's been 2.5 years since you've taken a class, maybe you may not have that stuff off the top of your head. If they just kind of showed up unannounced.
Do you know, Kyle, if it's more used, like, is the agenda questions more useful? Like, is that the main thing that people prep with, or do they usually chat with folks to get whatever they want?
Most of the chatting I know the staff does right now is kind of just like confirming times and
Yeah.
stuff. Um, this last semester, we ended up just having a lot of consistent students coming in, and so
Yeah.
there wasn't as much like agenda discussion because once a student came in and made weekly appointments, the tutors kind of knew what they were working on.
Yeah.
For the most part. So they use it more as like just a chatting tool to make sure the students know where to find them, or if they're going to be like 3 to 5 minutes late, things like that is what I've heard them using like the chatting.
Sure. But so the agenda, like the intake form when they're making the appointment, is that where people will upload files and say what they're working on, and that's what
Yeah.
helps?
They don't
Yeah.
always do that,
But it can be helpful.
but yeah.
Cool. Makes sense to me. That's great. So the good things about this for tutors is you don't get overwhelmed. It's like more predictable of how many students you're working with at once. Um, Scheduling flexibility would have been my expectation of the biggest thing. It's like, hey, you control your job now. It's like, a gig job. Just turn on the hours when you want to, and you get paid if you work them. That seems cool, and it sounds like your tutors like that a lot. Autonomy, and then updates, quick updates, and then consistency in an appointment prep. So yeah, and then people have ended up really liking the job again, right? Like is it an appealing job, or are you like fighting for tutors? I guess most people are, I guess. But how's that tutor hiring going?
I mean, tutor hiring goes pretty well, honestly, every year. Like, we'll do like hiring cycles kind of at the end of every semester, but even during semesters, I have faculty recommending students to me that I think would be a big benefit. I have students who just are interested in like helping other students, reaching out and getting hired. And so, every semester we lose staff, and so I have to replace them, but I'm never like having to fight to
Yeah,
maintain
it's not
enough
hard.
staff.
Hmm.
I mean, there's
Right,
generally enough interest, even with the changes. And of course, now
right,
the students don't know what it was like 5 years ago, so they only
right.
know what it's like now.
Yeah, and it's an attractive job with what it's like now.
Yeah,
Basically,
oh for
people are
sure. I
excited
mean,
about it.
when I meet with students, I pitch them a few different points I emphasize every time. One of them is like now this job I tell them like if they need a job to like pay the bills, then this is not a job for them. Because we're appointment based, because just the amount of staff we have, the amount of classes we cover, like you're not working 22 hours a week at this
Yep,
job. So if you're paying rent, like this is not the job for you. If you
yep,
have a
fair.
second job, that's great. But
Yeah,
but every time I tell students that, they're like, "That's great. I don't want to do this for money. I want to do this because I think
cool.
it's cool.
Yeah,
It's a resume. I can help other people. I've been tutoring my friends in the past. I may as well like want to do something formal with it. Like there are just a plethora of reasons of why they want help, and it's never because of like the money they
hmm.
make doing the job. It's because they want to help other people.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah, that
Which
screams
might be
out.
a shift.
What'd you say?
I said, which might be a shift, from when you're a drop-in tutor, who is
Consistent
getting paid
hours.
regardless,
Yeah,
right? Not to
yeah,
say that your heart's not in it, but
you
your
might
heart's really in it now.
stay. Yeah, yeah,
your heart's
you might
really in
stay for that reason.
it. Yeah.
Which is a good screening mechanism to make your tutor quality better. So that's actually interesting. All right, cool. Okay, great. And then, so just to wrap up the Penji stuff, and I have a couple other questions. The main reasons you chose to go with Penji, you had 3 or 4 software. Let's streamline and go into one. Data is really not clean right now, which is hard to communicate with campus. It's hard to justify the value. It's hard to improve your program. So data cleanliness, and then financial efficiency as well, because you didn't really have the means to shift to appointments before Penji as well. So the platform enabled you to shift to appointments and save money on wasted drop-in hours. I think those are the 3 big categories I heard, like streamlining software, um, financial efficiency, and then the other one I just said. So what was the other one? Yeah.
Data.
Right. Data cleanliness. Yep. Data cleanliness. Great. So how did the launch go? And did all of these things end up be like happening as expected? Or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I
Yeah.
remember any like huge snags
Right.
in our integration process.
No.
There were things that happened along the way that made it even better, like getting ITS to put it as a link within our PAC support,
Yeah.
our student facing portal, and like things like that that helped along the way. But I
Yeah.
don't remember any like the world didn't end, like nothing crashed.
No, I don't think
It
so.
was easy and clean and good.
Yep.
Mhm.
And now, like, basically everything's pretty streamlined. Data, like, are on those three objectives, would you say, is there any extra software that you have to use in terms of, hey, there's even this could be wrapped in, you know what I mean? Data cleanliness, is that easy? Financial efficiency stuff. So just any comments on those specifics before we move on?
Think we really utilize any other programs or softwares.
Yeah.
I pretty much run everything through Pingy. When I don't, I mean, we pull Excel spreadsheets, but I'm not running them through anything else.
I think that the only thing when I was still doing it that I did separate, I still had a separate financial spreadsheet where I would
Oh,
enter,
yeah.
I would use the data from Pingy to show hours, but I would also like have to calculate how much students were making, and I would keep track of that throughout the semester, depending on their different wages and or if they were work study and that sort of thing.
So,
Mm.
Which
like,
we actually don't do that
payroll.
now because A-State dropped the new like student worker like portal basically in my A-State back in October. And so that stuff's much easier for me to track now just in like within our my A-State system. So um I mean yeah, financially wise, like yeah, we don't run everything through Pingy just because there's a budget for
Right.
operating outside of Pingy, but
Do you think there's an opportunity to have a more streamlined flow of the data from Penji to that? Or like, because a lot of people talk about payroll being like a huge thing every other Friday, it's horrible. And, or is that just the reality of it needs to move over to the college's budget system? And that's just hard either way. Like if it was pre-calculated for, is there any calculations you have to do? Or is it literally just like using the visits table or something, you know?
The only reason I wasn't using it for payroll per se, I was using it on a semesterly basis to be
Ah,
able to see what my spending looked like over
yeah,
the course of a semester.
I
So I
see.
wasn't using it for payroll, but we did use it for payroll when there was a discrepancy. So if a student was like logging hours that they weren't working or something like
Because
that,
they
we
log the
could,
hours.
yeah, yeah. So we could
Oh,
go back in Penji and say like, oh, well, who were you tutoring
yeah, this
at
doesn't add
6 in
up.
the morning? Yeah, like
Right.
it doesn't make sense. So
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Some schools, I think, enter the data for the tutors, which
yeah.
is a huge problem. And yeah, so that's good. All right, cool. That all makes sense. So, a couple other the interesting ones that I thought would be great to hear your thoughts on. We already talked about the drop into appointments. So the early intervention side, I think that you get good response rates on this. Just would you walk through how the LSS and other centers, if you want, how they interface with early alert, early intervention at a state? Just kind of what's the workflow there?
So Kyle will have to speak to that now because we just let go of PAC support this year. So
Got
I
it.
don't know what that looks like
Oh, interesting.
right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't, as far as I know, really have a
Oh,
like warning system on campus anymore. The early warnings we get are through faculty recommendations. They may reach out
yeah.
to students, but there's no prompting software, as far as I'm aware, like active at A-State
Tracking
that's
cases like that.
reporting things. I mean, I think advisors maybe get prompted through like Slate or something, or they may be
Oh,
State
y'all use
Submission,
Slate now?
um,
Okay.
but yeah, as far as I know, there's no software that I'm hearing about or
That
that I'm aware of.
academic support is working with. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is Slate going to a wider array of units? Do you know?
I don't.
Not unknown, unknown.
It for like enrollment and they have it for
Oh, see
advising,
the
but I don't know that any,
advising uses it, you think?
yeah,
Okay.
advising and enrollment, but I don't know anyone else
Nice.
doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Back in the day, Kelly, when you were doing it, would you just walk through the basic bullet points of how, the alerts would come in and you would do X, Y, or Z with them, and what were the keys to like getting students to reply?
Mhm. So it was mostly our graduate students who were responding to those.
Uh,
So as a note would come through PAC support, we had sort of a generic email that we would send them, but we would make sure to include the student's name, the subject that they were struggling in, sort of what the alert was, some language that was like growth mindset centered. We would give them options for how we could support them, whether it was through coaching or tutoring or both. And then, we've talked about this before, but we would always have a prompt at the end that had a question in it so that the student felt inclined to respond to us,
yeah,
so that we
right.
knew whether or not they were seeing it and whether they were taking action or not. And
Yeah,
the last that we were looking at it, we had about a 20 to 25% participation rate of students following up and actually going to tutoring or requesting a
yeah,
coach or something like that.
yeah, which is very high. So I think, yeah, those are all really good ones. So personalization, growth mindset's a good one to add. And when you say that, what's an example of some language that would be growth mindset centered in the, anything you can remember?
I mean, something like we know that with effort that you can be successful in this
Yeah,
course.
we see that, if you put in a certain things, then you can actually improve the performance, and we know how to do it, kind of like that.
Right.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, great. So 20-25% of those students you'd reach out to would use tutoring in the term.
Mhm.
It's great.
At one of our centers, not necessarily a learning
Yeah,
support,
yeah.
but we would access everyone's data.
And you would tell them about all the centers, right? Like, yeah,
Whichever one was most applicable to
say,
their
yeah,
needs.
there's writing, there's also the LSS for this subject or whatever. Yeah. Great. Okay, another one is, so two more topics would be, one is like program impact through looking at persistence rates. I know you did that a decent amount and thought about how to tell the story of the impact of the program and how to, do that with data. And then the second topic we'll get to is just like, I'm just interested in the like leadership transition and how, Kyle coming up through the ranks as a tutor and then taking over is pretty cool. And that has to happen at other centers at times. So, but maybe starting with the impact side. So how did you approach, Kelly, and then I'll hear your opinion as well, Kyle. How did you approach studying data to try and tell the story of impact?
Well, I mean, course by course, we would follow up with faculty. We always looked at them, or I always looked at them as our like frontline and the folks who were going to be the best referral system for us. And so if they had leaned on us for tutoring or some other academic support throughout the semester, we always wanted to turn that data back over to them, even if they hadn't requested it. So making sure that they understood the participation, and then they can interpret sometimes the impact of that on their own, just depending. Some faculty would reach out because their course had high DFW rates, or we had reached out because they had high DFW rates. Some faculty had reached out because they had poor course evaluations, and they wanted to see if, an academic support peer would show them like more favorable responses
Yeah,
over the next academic year. So anyway, we always wanted to give that back to the faculty at the course level, where we had those partnerships. Then communicating our work at like the program level, making sure that all the deans and chairs were seeing just our data generally, that they knew by program, department, college, how many students we were seeing and what that looked like, and growth over time, or just like year to year comps. And then communicating that up because we were in university college and we had a direct line to academic affairs, making sure that our impact, not just as learning support, but as the entire cohort of tutoring centers across campus, how we communicated that to academic affairs, whether we were positioning that for like HLC and assessment and accreditation, or if it was like, hey, we need to move, or we need more resources, or like the math center, they got naming rights, whatever that looks like. So at all levels,
Yeah.
communicating successes at all levels,
Yeah. Right.
for more buy-in.
Yeah. So those are the levels. That's great. And then in terms of communicating it itself, so usage data is obviously important. So like I'm basically gonna get to like types of data that you have found compelling to people. And so usage data, and underneath that, I heard you mention year-over-year growth is always nice. People say, oh, there's more tutoring visits. That's a good thing. Something good is happening, right? Um, can you speak on the usage data part, and then anything about grades or retention, if that factored in big or small, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I think that usage and grades were really important at the faculty level, like course
Hmm.
reports at the faculty level. But then at the college level, more usage data, like less concerned about grades, more just concerned about the number of students coming in
Mm.
to the centers at the college and department level. The administrators, they want to know what the usage data looks like, but they're more impressed generally, I found, with the efficiency. So where we could show what our dollars equated to. So we never really talked about money with the faculty or the department or chair communication or college communication, but we always talked about money at the administrator level. So if I was reporting it to my dean, if I was reporting it up to the provost or academic affairs, then I always equated, however many tutoring hours with how many dollars, and showed the efficiency of the center.
Cool. That's a great point. Yeah, great. And so the mid, you said faculty course level, and then you said kind of chairs of departments. Is that what that is? Like department level, basically. And then also deans of colleges. Would that be in that like middle group that's focused on usage?
Yep.
Yep. And then the administrator side, so these could be different types of deans, right? That might be a little bit more focused on, um, you know,
Yeah,
or
administrator was like my dean, so like who I reported to,
of the
and
academic
then
college.
yeah,
Yeah.
the university college,
Yeah.
and
Sorry. Yeah.
then that's okay, and then the provost office or academic affairs. So
Yeah.
that was like our reporting line up.
Great.
And then tab though, we transitioned into more qualitative data that we were pulling out of Penji, and we were doing qualitative assessments once we had felt like we had kind of hit a ceiling of what we
Mm,
could do with the dollars
more.
that we had. Yeah, like how much more can we do with the same resources? And then Tab, she had a little bit more fluctuation, and she was seeing fewer appointments, but appointments were lasting longer. And
Mm-hmm.
then through qualitative assessments, we were seeing that the quality, we were trying to assess not just quantity, but the quality of those sessions, and seeing that go up, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to focus more on additional programming based on qualitative feedback. So she had helped to implement thesis and dissertation workshops based on what she was seeing in the qualitative data from the Writing Center.
Nice. That makes total sense. So you try to drive up numbers and usage, which of course that is going to usually impact grades in a positive way. More folks from a course using tutoring is a good thing. But once you're tapped out in terms of you've really gotten the efficiency to as near as good as it can be, then the next level is just how do you improve the quality of each session, and how do you measure that? And that has to be a bit more qualitative. Um, any thoughts on any of these areas, Kyle, as you've gotten more into this sort of interfacing with the different levels of units, or the reports you have to give to folks?
Not particularly. This year, there were a lot of changes on campus amongst tutoring departments in general. So this year has really just been like maintaining what Kelly and Tab and Portia had set up originally. And
Just
so
operationally.
yeah, this last
Yeah.
year has been like, let's make sure that the centers continue to do the work they've been doing. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to change much about like assessment, reporting, anything like that.
Yeah.
That's a conversation for later in the summer with some other folks I'm working with, but that really
Cool.
hasn't shifted at all in the last, 10 or 11 months.
Yeah. Nice. Seems like I'm just looking at I don't know if you've seen this, Kelly. We have like a new little bit of new dashboarding stuff that should go to the admin panel, but I can make this for y'all custom um, now. But this is like A state, lots of colors going on here. So if I don't group it, this is just like total visits, or we could do total students by whatever period here, and you can group by community. And so it does look like this is quarters, so like actual calendar quarter of the year. So this would be like January through March
Mhm.
across all the A state. It looks like Q1 versus Q1 of last year, it's gone up, right? And Q2, um, you know, considerably up, maybe, I don't know. But so it seems like are y'all still growing, does it feel like? But then Q4 maybe a little bit down. But yeah, how's the numbers been feeling from what the data you're looking at?
I mean, tutoring wise across campus, this was actually our best year of tutoring.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
We've been tracking numbers. It was the
Yeah,
highest year.
yeah,
There are a few different reasons for that, including the math tutoring centers doing some. They have implemented some stuff like requiring tutoring, which is pulling our numbers
nice.
up pretty aggressively.
That's great.
Um,
Yeah,
so
this is the LSS by month, and it's looking like April is quite a lot. But
yeah, so I mean, it's one of our better years of tutoring. We also have, um, I think in some ways, like our program outreach has been improving some in the last couple of years, partially because I think centers are, or like we have departments who I think are hearing about what we're doing with other departments, and they're now interested in doing that.
cool.
So we've been able to like incorporate some new learning groups or communities for groups that we haven't in the past. We got to like test pilot a few of those this last year and did extremely well.
Yeah,
And so that's something that we're going to look at pushing forward into the next
keep
couple
doing more
academic
of.
years is like what kind of departments can we partner with that need this help?
Great, awesome. Um, so partnering with departments, then y'all feel have been very successful in terms of like in terms of outreach, in terms of getting students aware. Those relationships, Kelly, you've talked about a lot, like faculty relationships, but um, so yeah, is that about right? The department partnerships are pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, those faculty are the best ones to sell what our center does
100%.
better than
Yeah.
anyone else really on campus.
Right. Right. Agreed.
Hey, I just asked, sorry, while we were on Madeline, she said that there's an early alert option in Canvas that they're pointing faculty
Mm,
to. So I'll just forward that to you in case you want to
cool.
Who's that
there.
sending the notification to? Just academic affairs?
That's a great question to follow up with.
Because I mean, that's a great software, but
It's not happening.
Yeah.
Do you have any specifics, Kyle? Any specific thoughts on like the faculty, how to have great relationships with faculty, and what the standard process you might have is to keep building those? Like if you had advice for another director who doesn't do any of that, right? They just
I think one
exist.
big thing is like having, like Kelly said, the usage data makes a difference,
Yeah,
showing like, hey, your students are coming to see us. The qualitative data that makes a difference too is like your students are coming to see us and the quality of work we're doing is good.
they're happy.
Students are
Yeah,
benefiting from coming to see us.
yeah.
Once you kind of get that baseline down, like that's what the faculty want, right? If they're going to
And
encourage students to come here,
and will
they've
you
got to trust.
email certain faculty out of the blue? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
oh, yep. Hey, by the way, I'm Kyle with the LSS, and here's the data, and that's sort of how you do that.
some of it, well, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the faculty we see students consistently for already know kind of what we do. Either
Most
Kelly communicated
faculty,
with them in
yeah,
the past, I
yeah.
maybe even worked with them at different points, or my staff works with them during the semester. But once you kind of establish the baseline, the big thing I've noticed is like about once every 2 months, I'll reach out to faculty who we're like actively working with in classes, and I'll just schedule a time to like sit down with them, just to like
Hmm,
chat about like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what I'm hearing from the tutor who's working for the class. This is what they're seeing as problems or as benefits or what they resources they've asked for. I ask them like, what do they need from us? Like, what are they expecting us to be able to do? What are their students needing? It's just a really good time to like check in,
right.
not just on the semester where like if I meet with them in May, the semester's over. Like if they needed help, it's too late or we're done.
Right.
So if I meet with them pre-midterms and then right after finals, we actually have a chance to like chat about what we're seeing actively on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis and how we can improve that. And the faculty I've worked with have been really, really good about sitting down with me for those like 30-minute to 45-minute meetings. I meet with all of my staff once a month, so I get to like ask them before I go to these meetings, like, hey, when I sit down with this engineering faculty, what are things, or is there anything you want me to bring up with them that you need or you've seen that you could use help with?
Mm,
Um, so asking them like for resources and then also asking them like what they need from us has just been a really good way of like
that's great.
working with them, because
Yeah.
they want to see their students succeed just as much as we do. It's just two different sides of it having to come together for that.
I think that's super valuable. How often do you find yourself meeting with faculty in a semester? A few times, a few meetings with faculty, or do you a
Probably about
lot
twice a semester, yeah. If something specific comes up, I might have to meet with them an extra time, or if we're
with
hosting like an
individual
event.
faculty? You meet with individual faculty twice a semester, so you're
Oh
doing a
yeah,
ton
like a
of.
specific faculty. Yeah.
So how many like total faculty meetings would you guess you would do in a semester?
This last semester it would have been like maybe 8
Cool.
faculty
Cool.
that I met
Yeah.
with, differently to talk about some like core stuff with them.
Nice. Yeah,
I'm hoping that number will go up some because we're trying to incorporate some additional
that's
classes
great.
into like what we do. But
When you're meeting with faculty, are you talking to like an Amanda Lambertus who's a chair who like is servicing multiple courses, or are you meeting with like a specific course faculty?
depends on the faculty. I meet with Dr. Bhattacharya, who is our dean of engineering, because he's super invested in all of like the SIs that we do for them. But I might meet with like Jessica Cooper, who's just a faculty member in radiological science that reached out and asked for some help with classes. So it just kind of depends on the particular courses we're working with. That's it indicates like
Hmm.
whether it's a single faculty for a specific course or a faculty who might oversee other faculty.
I could see that being a practice that a lot of people leading learning centers don't do at all. That if they could say, "Hey, I need to have 10 faculty meetings this semester," that could make a big difference for people, and they open their eyes a bit and like start that whole collaborative thing, right? So I think that's a really good one.
I think it's been great because, like, if Dr. Bhattacharya believes in if one of the deans believes in what we do, he's going to
Right.
have faculty what we do. So that faculty might have like 20 faculty
Cascading
meetings that I don't have
effect.
to have.
It's great. That's a big thing that Sarah, who you know, Kelly, from Georgia, she always talked about faculty liaisons, where she tries to like get a coffee with them once a semester, who are like the key faculty that will help to let the other faculty know. So it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing, just pretty organically. Yeah, that's cool. All right, good one. Last thing is just transitioning. How has the transition gone? Kelly and Tab had laid a lot of the foundations, and there's a lot of processes built out. And was this your first full-time gig out of college,
I worked
Kyle?
for a year on campus as an advisor before I came
Got
up
it.
here to work for Kelly for a few
So
months.
this is very management heavy, quite complex, I guess. So just what were the keys, if anything, to, the successful handoff and keeping things going, and any comments from either of you on that?
But a big part of it was like you mentioned earlier, I literally worked as a tutor in both, like I worked as a tutor for 4 years. I worked as a GA for Kelly. I worked part-time for Kelly. I worked as an assistant director for Kelly. And then I worked, in Kelly's job after she left. And so like I got to see tutoring from literally the ground up,
Right.
which was a
Super
unique
helpful.
opportunity. Like
Hmm.
no one else really who's kind of come to this was here when we moved the center upstairs or when we made the transition to Penji or had to like
Yeah.
advocate for that program. So, but Kelly also did a fantastic job of like documenting everything. When I
Hmm.
took over the position, she gave me a flash drive, which I still currently have hooked up to my computer, that had like I don't know how many hundreds of documents Kelly has in this flash drive, but it's got like everything. Every document that Kelly used that she thought would be important or I might want to reference, even if it was 6 years ago, is
Yeah.
on this flash drive. And they're all, organized into folders, they're all titled. So if I can't find something I need, I look for those. And if I can't find them, I just call Kelly at that point.
Right.
Um, but that flash drive has been super useful
Yeah.
for the handoff, like just having a repository of information. Uh,
Yeah.
Even though I was someone who was pretty familiar with the intricacies of this position, like that's still been a big help. I can't imagine coming into this not knowing anything and not having that would have been
Really
an
hard.
absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Um, there was a few trickier parts of the handoff, particularly because Kelly, like there were three kind of tutoring masterminds on campus, if you will. It was like Kelly, Tab, and Portia. And within the same like 5 month span, they all actually left or went to different roles. And so that just kind of left
Now
like
you're
a
the
huge,
only mastermind.
Yeah.
it pretty much just left like it left a huge vacuum in like
Right.
the tutoring
Power
department on
vacuum.
campus.
Yeah.
And that was felt not just by me, but by the other departments that kind of house those centers. And
Right.
so, that's partly why like I haven't been able to maybe do as much changes or like really look at like changing like programmatic outreach, things like that, because this year really was like,
You have to keep
hey,
the ship
everyone's gone.
steady.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. People need to
let's
like
keep
trust that it's
floating.
all going to be fine still. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Good
But
call.
Kelly also has done a great job since I mean, she was here for 7 years, maybe just under six, seven. But Kelly also did a good job of like just building positive relationships, not only with faculty or with staff, but also like with her direct supervisor, with the provost's office.
Right.
Like Kelly built a good branding for LSS
Hmm.
here on campus. So like when I took over, it wasn't like I had to rebrand this or I had to like overcome some stigma that existed because people already trusted what we do.
Right.
Kelly did such a good job of like advocating for who we were. And so now I'm just like continuing that advocacy rather than having to like overcome anything, which was
Right.
all kind of nice and a little bit easy.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, anything to add, Kelly, that you felt you were focused on to make sure it was easy for Kyle, right? Or like the handoff part?
Mm, so something that I gave Kyle, but that we had built, we had like revised together over the years, but was just like a yearly calendar that because everything that we do is really cyclical, um, I like having like a month to month, like generally in this month, this is what happens, and like this is our
Hmm.
cycle. And that's something that when I came into my current role, I actually asked my predecessor for. I said, this is what I gave the person who's taking over my job, like, can you make something similar for me so that I know that in March, like, these are the big tasks, like, they
Yeah,
surprise me. And she was like, no. I mean, she did her best, but it's like not something
wasn't
that's
clear.
not, yeah, that wasn't how her brain worked. That wasn't how she functioned, but that's how I function. Like, I want to see the big picture. And
Right.
so that's a piece that, I'll like still refer back to. But I like
Cool.
that Kyle talked about the branding piece because when I took over the LSS, it was not that. And I
Yeah,
was like mending a lot of bridges. So I think that was I'm glad
a
that's been
good point.
your experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to hear.
Yeah. Good to hear.
Cool. Well, that's perfect. I think it's a good place to stop. So, thank you both. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there, and we'll definitely parse some of it out into little how-tos and everything. And it's just nice to kind of tie together the different stories from Learning Center. So, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah,
the time.
thanks, man.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for
see you
having
around.
us.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kyle, let us know if you need anything in the
Yeah,
next
of
couple
course.
months.
Thanks,
All right.
man.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.